everybody. Alright, so today we're going to read a little portion, very tiny, because it is a massive book, and I am not reading through this whole thing, and the book that we're reading before this is much easier to understand, and you'll get the complete gist of, the myth that is King Arthur's life. But I'm going to first open this up with a little bit of the introduction, and some information about Sir Thomas Malory, who's the man that wrote this edition of the book. And this book is called Morete D'Arthur, and that's French for the death of Arthur. And the whole premise of this book is that from Arthur's life, he's heading towards death, and the path on which he leads toward it. And so I'm going to read the introduction. Sir Thomas Malory. Scholars have determined that there were at least 6 Thomas Malorys alive in the 1400s when Morete D'Arthur was written. Considerable evidence points to the likeliest Arthur as one Sir Thomas Malory, or Malor, of Newbold Revel in Worcestershire, that's a mouthful, who was born in the first quarter of the 15th century. A member of the gentry, he became a soldier on the service of Richard Buchan, Earl of Warwick, with whom he fought in a siege of Calais in 1436. In records of the period, he was accused of various crimes, including armed robbery and attempted murder, and he is said to have executed several dramatic escapes from prison. Several things about Malory seem indisputable, however. As in Arthur's time, when post-Roman Britain was in a state of fierce tribal war, he lived in an age of great unrest. Europe was still recovering from the Black Plague and a century of war. In England, 2 powerful families fought for the throne. Although he may have been a scoundrel, Malory was also, it seems clear, a man of ideals who believed in courage and loyalty and who mourned the passing of chivalry. Incarcerated for long periods of time, he had many hours to fill his imagination with French romances and tales of chivalry, volumes of which were readily at hand. It is thought that Morete D'Arthur was written during his imprisonment. Malory referred to himself as a night prisoner. With a military man's passion for the details of a conquest, a prisoner's sense of injustice, and a penitent's desire for redemption, he dictated himself wholeheartedly to this retelling of Arthurian legends. And so, what happens after this is that there's another introduction by a woman who's done quite a lot of research about this, named Elizabeth J. Bryan, and she goes on to talk about how Malory's text kind of resembles other Arthurian legends, but there was also another book that published about the same time, in 1934, the edition that was published, 1885, by William Claxton, and he kind of wrote the basic idea, and there's a lot of back and forth between Caxton and the Malory text on which is the more truthful, or if it's just a bunch of stories that have been heaped together. And the thing is, by medieval standards, both of these are perfectly normal to have lots of variations between the books, because at the time of medieval, there was no, printing press. Every single book was done by hand. It was going to be handwritten, it was going to be hand illustrated, it was going to be hand bound, and then they'd start working on the next book. So even if you have, let's say, 2 copies of the same book, they're not going to be exactly the same, because they're written by a person, not a machine. And so, let's see, they were, and these various people, scribes, compilers, commentators, illuminators, translators, and correctors, often had literary sensibilities and sometimes felt free to revise and reshape the text they were copying or decorating. So, let me put it into context. Alright, we'll use our science book, for example. Our science book, let's say we are to copy it by hand. But let's say I gave this book to 20 different people. Alright? All of those 20 different people may have slight different ideas on how they want to tell you the information. Alright? It is up to them to write it down. Does that make sense? Alright. So, we'll go on to talk about how he wasn't really... Malory, the man that wrote this, wasn't really technically an author. What he did is that he found all of these different stories and he compiled them together and then added his own imagination to make them fit together better. And so they could be, some of them may have absolutely nothing to do with Arthur, but he took some of those tales that he decided, okay, these are about knights, these are about, them being honorable, about tales of adventure, and slowly slipping them in and making them fit because they make sense together. And then in other books, such as like the Caxton version, he did kind of the same idea, but he would cut things out that he was like, I don't think this really makes sense. And so it's really, no matter what book you're going to read about King Arthur, it's really up to the author's discretion of what you're going to get. And so I will read a small portion of this, because it is a very, very big book. And I remember the first time I read this, and it was immensely long. Okay, so chapter 4, The Death of King Uther Pendragon. And you guys have already heard this story, so you should be able to draw maybe some differences from this text to the text that you're listening to. There within 2 years King Uther fell sick of a great malady, and in the meanwhile his enemies usurped upon him, and did a great battle upon his men, and slew many of his people. Sir, said Merlin, ye may not lie so as ye do, for ye must to the field, though ye ride on a horse litter. For ye shall never have the better of your enemies, but if your person be there, and then shall ye have the victory. So it was done as Merlin had devised, and they carried the king forth in a horse litter with a great host towards his enemies. And at Salabans there met with the king a great host to the north. And that day Sir Ulfius and Sir Braestus did great deeds of arms, and King Uther's men overcame the north in battle, and many people, and put the remnant to flight. And then the king returned unto London, and made great joy of his victory. And there he fell passing sore sick, so that 3 days and 3 nights he was speechless. Wherefore all the barons made great sorrow, and asked Merlin what counsel was best. There is none other remedy, said Merlin, but God will have his will. But look ye, all barons be before King Uther to mourn, and God and I shall make him speak. So on the morn all the barons with Merlin came to fore the king. Then Merlin said aloud unto King Uther, Sir, shall your son Arthur be king after your days of this realm with all appetence? Then Uther Pendragon turned to him and said in hearing of all, I give him God's blessing and mine, and bid him pray for my soul, and righteously and worshipfully that he claim the crown, on forfeiture of my blessing. And therewithin he yielded up the ghost, and then he was interned as long to a king. Wherefore the queen Igraine made great sorrow, and all the barons. Right, and we'll read the next little part too, alright? This is all about King Arthur pulling the stone, or pulling the sword from the stone. Chapter 5, How Arthur was chosen king, and of wonders and marvels of the sword taken out of the stone by said Arthur. Then stood the realm in great jeopardy long while, for every lord that mighty of men made him strong, and many weened to have been king. Then Merlin went to the Archbishop of Canterbury, and counselled him for send all the lords of the realm, and all the gentlemen of arms, that they should come to London for Christmas, upon pain of cursing, and for this cause that Jesus, that was born on that night, that he would of his great mercy show some miracle, as he was come to be king of mankind, for to show some miracle who should be rightwise king of this realm. So the archbishop, by the advice of Merlin, sent for all the lords and gentlemen of arms, that they should come by Christmas even unto London. And many of them made clean of their life, that their prayer might be more acceptable unto God. So in the greatest church of London, whether it was Paul's or not, the French book maketh no mention, all the estates were long or day in the church for to pray. And when matins and the first mass was done, there was seen in the churchyard against the high altar a great stone, foursquare, like unto a marble stone, and in the midst therefore was like an anvil of steel a foot on high, and therein struck a fair sword by the point, and letters there was written in gold about the sword that said thus, Whosoever pulleth out this sword of this stone and anvil is rightwise king born of all England. Then the people marveled and told it to the archbishop. I command, said the archbishop, that ye keep you within your church and pray unto God still that no man touch the sword till the high mass be all done. Then when all masses were done, all the lords went to behold the stone and the sword. And when they saw some scriptures, some assayed such as would be the king. But none might stir the sword nor move it. He is not here, said the archbishop, that shall achieve the sword, but doubt not God will make him known. But this is my counsel, said the archbishop, that we let purvey 10 knights, men of good frame, and they to keep this sword. So it was ordained, and they was made a cry, that every man should assay that would for win the sword. And upon New Year's Day the barons let make a joust and a tournament, that all knights that would joust or keep tourney there might play, and all this was ordained for to keep the lords together, and all the commons, for the archbishop trusted that God would make him known that should win the sword. So upon New Year's Day, when the service was done, the barons rode unto the field, some to joust, some to tourney, and so it happened that Sir Hector, and quick side note, Sir Hector in this book is spelled with an E, alright, because in French, H is silent, usually. Sir Hector, that had great livelihood about London, rode unto the joust, and with him rode Sir Kay his son, and young Arthur, that was his nourished brother. And Sir Kay was made knight at All Hallows Mass afore. So as they rode to the joust ward, Sir Kay lost his sword, for he had left it at his father's lodging, and so he prayed young Arthur for to ride for his sword. I will well, said Arthur, and rode fast after the sword, and when he came home, the lady and all were out to see the jousting. Then was Arthur wroth, and said to him, I will ride to the churchyard, and take the sword with me that sticketh in the stone, for my brother Kay shall not be without a sword this day. So when he came to the churchyard, Sir Arthur alighted, and tied his stone to the stile, and so he went to the tent, and found no knights there, for they were at the jousting. And so he handled the sword by the handles, and lightly and fiercely pulled it out of the stone, and took his horse, and rode his way until he came to his brother Sir Kay, and delivered him the sword. As soon as Sir Kay saw the sword, he wist well it was the sword of the stone, and so he rode to his father, Sir Hector, and said, Sir, lo, here is the sword of the stone, wherefore I must be king of this land. When Sir Hector beheld the sword, he returned again, and came to the church. And there they alighted, all three, and went into the church. And anon he made Sir King swear upon a book how he came to that sword. Sir, said Sir Kay, by my brother Arthur, for he brought it to me. How gat ye this sword? Said Sir Hector to Arthur. Sir, I will tell you. When I came home from my brother's sword, I found nobody at home to deliver me his sword, and so I thought my brother Sir Kay should not be swordless, and so I came hither eagerly, and pulled it out of the stone without any pain. Found ye any knights about this sword, Sir Hector? Nay, said Arthur. Now, Sir Hector to Arthur, I understand ye must be king of this land. Wherefore I, said Arthur, and for what cause? Sir, said Hector, for God will have it so, for there should never any man have drawn out of this sword, but he shall be the right wise king of this land. Now let me see whether ye can put the sword there as it was, and pull it out again. There is no mastery, said Arthur, and so he put in the stone wherein Sir Hector essayed to pull out the stone, and failed. Alright, and as you guys notice, there's going to be a little less magic in this one, and a lot more about religion, alright? Which is a main difference from the children's story that we're reading, and the more adult story, which is the death of Arthur. Now, both stories do have in common, we'll be getting to eventually the quest for the Holy Grail, as well as other religious fights that different knights went on. Alright, so we're going to be talking about a little bit more. I hope you guys enjoyed the book, and I will see you guys later. Have fun. Bye.